couldn't resist. After the sheriff's daughter slipped into his cabin, he had chosen this place because no one came here unless they truly had a reason. The cabin stood deep in the woods, a good distance from the town, far enough that sounds of people, wagons, and voices never reached it. Tall trees surrounded it like silent guards. In winter, snow covered everything. In summer, dust and heat ruled the land. Either way, it was quiet. And quiet was exactly what he wanted. The man had not always lived like this. Once he had been part of the town. He had laughed with others, worked beside them, and believed he belonged somewhere. But life had a way of changing a man slowly, then all at once. A bad decision, a misunderstanding, and the weight of regret had pushed him away from people. He learned that distance was safer. Out here, alone, no one judged him. No one asked questions. No one expected anything. Every morning he woke before sunrise. He chopped wood, checked his traps, and tended the small patch of land behind the cabin. His hands were rough, his movements careful and practiced. He spoke to no one, sometimes not even to himself. Days passed like pages in a book no one else would ever read. The sheriff knew about him, of course. In a town that small, everyone knew everyone, even those who tried to disappear. The sheriff had warned him once, years ago, to stay out of trouble. The man had nodded, said little, and done exactly that. He avoided town unless supplies were absolutely necessary. When he did go, he kept his head down and left quickly. That night began like any other. The sky had darkened early, heavy clouds rolling in from the west. Wind moved through the trees, making them whisper and creak. He lit a small lamp inside the cabin and sat at the rough wooden table, eating a simple meal. Bread, beans, water, enough to keep him going. Rain started suddenly pounding the roof hard enough to drown out every other sound. He welcomed it. Rain meant fewer people wandering. Rain meant he could sleep without worry. Then he heard it. A noise that did not belong. At first he thought it was the wind pushing against the door. But then came another sound. Soft, hurried, unsure. Footsteps. Close ones. His body went still. He set the spoon down slowly. No one came here by accident, especially not at night, and especially not in a storm like this. His hand moved toward the knife he kept nearby, not because he wanted trouble, but because he had learned never to assume safety. The door opened. Cold air rushed in, along with rain and a figure slipping inside quickly, pulling the door shut behind her. Man. She leaned against it, breathing hard, hair wet, clothes darkened by rain. The lamp's light flickered across her face, and his heart skipped in a way it hadn't in years. She was young, but clearly grown, and frightened. Her eyes were wide, searching the room as if expecting someone to follow her in. Neither of them spoke. The man stood slowly, keeping his distance. He could see now who she was. Anyone in town would recognize her. The sheriff's daughter. He had seen her from afar before, at the general store, walking beside her father, always composed, always careful. She did not belong in his cabin. "You shouldn't be here," he said at last, his voice low and controlled. She swallowed. "I know," she replied, her voice shaking, "but I didn't know where else to go." The rain beat harder against the roof, as if urging the moment forward. He looked at the door, then back at her. Helping her meant risk. Letting her stay meant questions. And questions led to trouble. Yet sending her back into the storm felt wrong. "You need to leave," he said, though the words felt heavy. "I can't," she said quickly. "Please, just for a little while." Something in her tone stopped him. It wasn't just fear. It was desperation, real, raw, and unplanned. He sighed and stepped away from the knife. "Sit," he said, pointing to a chair near the fire. "You're soaked." She hesitated, then obeyed. Water dripped from her clothes onto the wooden floor. He handed her a blanket without letting his fingers touch hers. He kept reminding himself who she was, who her father was, where this could lead. As she wrapped the blanket around herself, he returned to his seat, keeping space between them. The cabin felt smaller now, the silence heavier. Minutes passed. The fire cracked softly. "What happened?" he asked, not because he wanted to know, but because silence felt dangerous. She shook her head. Not yet. He accepted that. Some truths needed time. Outside, the storm showed no sign of stopping. And deep down, the man knew something else too. This night was not a passing moment. It was the beginning of something he had tried very hard to avoid. The fire burned low as the night stretched on. The rain still fell, but softer now, like it was tired of shouting. Inside the cabin, the air felt warm yet heavy. The man added another piece of wood to the fire, careful not to look at her for too long. He could sense her presence even without turning his head. It was impossible to ignore someone who did not belong in his quiet world. She sat wrapped in the blanket, her shoulders slowly relaxing as the warmth reached her. Her breathing became steadier. For a while, neither of them spoke. Silence filled the space, but it was no longer empty. It carried questions, worries, and unspoken thoughts. He finally broke the quiet. "The storm will last a few more hours," he said. "When it clears, you should go back." She nodded, but her eyes stayed on the fire. "I understand." Yet something in her voice suggested she was not certain she could leave so easily. He studied her carefully now. She looked different from the girl he had seen in town. There was no confidence in her posture, no calm expression. She looked like someone who had run a long way with no clear destination. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the blanket. "You're hurt?" he asked. "No, just tired." He believed her. Still, worry settled in his chest. People did not run into the woods in the middle of the night just because they were tired. He poured water into a small metal cup and handed it to her, setting it on the table instead of placing it in her hand. "Drink," he said. "It'll help." "Thank you," she whispered. As she drank, her eyes lifted to his face for the first time since she entered the cabin. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world outside seemed very far away. He quickly looked away, annoyed at himself. He had promised never to invite trouble into his life again. "You shouldn't trust me," he said suddenly. She looked confused. "Why?" "Because I'm not part of your world," he replied, "and I don't want to be." She considered his words carefully. "Maybe that's why I came here." He frowned. "That makes no sense." "It does to me," she said quietly. The fire popped, sending a spark into the air. He stood and adjusted the logs, giving himself something to do with his hands. He felt restless, uneasy in a way he hadn't felt in years. He reminded himself that she was the sheriff's daughter. That alone was reason enough to keep his distance. "Your father will be worried," he said. "He'll be looking for you." Her jaw tightened. "That's what I'm afraid of." He turned to face her again. "Afraid of your own father?" She did not answer right away. Instead, she stared into the fire, her face tense. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. "Not of him, of what follows him." He waited. "There are things he deals with," she continued. "Things people aren't supposed to know." She paused, as if choosing each word carefully. "I heard something. Something I wasn't meant to hear." A warning bell rang in his mind. Trouble had a way of spreading, and he had worked hard to stay out of it. "You shouldn't tell me," he said. "I already involved you by coming here," she replied. "I didn't plan to. I just ran." He exhaled slowly. "You need to understand what you're asking of me." "I'm not asking you to fix anything," she said. "Just don't send me away yet." Her honesty disarmed him. He sat back down, rubbing his tired eyes. "One night," he said at last. "That's all I can offer. Thank you." Time passed differently after that. They spoke of small things, where she grew up, how the woods scared her as a child, how he learned to live alone. Their words stayed light, careful, never crossing into places that felt dangerous. Yet beneath every sentence was something else, something neither of them named. At one point she laughed softly at something he said. The sound surprised them both. He hadn't heard laughter in his cabin for as long as he could remember. It stirred something inside him that he quickly pushed down. "You should sleep," he said, standing up. "I'll stay awake." "I do," he said firmly. She understood and lay down near the fire, still wrapped in the blanket. He sat at the table, watching the door, listening to the rain fade into the night. As her breathing deepened, he stared into the shadows of the cabin. He felt pulled in two directions, toward the quiet life he had built and toward the unexpected responsibility now resting under his roof. By the time the storm finally passed, he knew one thing for certain. When morning came, nothing would be simple anymore. Morning arrived quietly. The rain had stopped some time before dawn, leaving the woods damp and heavy with mist. Pale light slipped through the small window of the cabin, touching the rough walls and the dying fire. The man had not slept. He sat in his chair, listening to the sounds of the forest waking up, every sense alert. She stirred near the fire, shifting under the blanket. For a moment, she looked peaceful, almost like she belonged there. That thought unsettled him. No one belonged in his cabin except him. He stood and stepped outside briefly, breathing in the cold air, reminding himself who he was and why he lived this way. When he returned, she was sitting up, rubbing her eyes. "Morning," she said softly. "Morning," he replied, keeping his voice steady. She looked around the cabin as if seeing it clearly for the first time. The simple furniture, the worn tools, the signs of a life built on routine and distance. "You really live out here alone?" she said. "Yes," he answered. "By choice." "I can see why. It's quiet." "Quiet keeps things from getting complicated," he said. Her lips curved into a faint smile, but it faded quickly. "Sometimes quiet makes things louder inside." He didn't respond. Some truths didn't need answers. He poured water into a pot and set it over the fire to warm. They ate a simple breakfast in silence. The calm of the morning felt fragile, like it could break with a single wrong word. "You said I should leave when the storm passed," she said finally. "Yes," he hesitated. "I don't know what's safe for you." "That's not my place." She stood and walked slowly to the window, peering out at the trees. "They'll be looking for me." "They already are," he said. Her shoulders tensed. "If they find me here, it won't be good for either of us," he finished. She turned to face him. "Then why are you still helping me?" He set the cup down harder than necessary. "Because sending you away last night felt wrong," he said. "That's all." She studied his face as if trying to read something beneath his words. "You're not a bad man," she said quietly. He laughed once without humor. "You don't know me." "I know enough," she replied. A long silence followed. Outside, a bird called from the trees. Somewhere far off, a horse moved. The world kept going, unaware of the tension inside the cabin. "I need to tell you something," she said at last. He raised a hand. "Be careful." "I overheard a conversation," she continued. "It involved someone my father trusted. Someone who shouldn't have been trusted. You're dragging me closer to something I don't want to be part of." "I know," she said, "but I couldn't carry it alone." He paced the small room, frustration building. "You don't understand what it costs me to be involved. I came out here to disappear. And I came here because you already had," she said. "No one would think to look here first." That truth settled heavily between them. By midday, the tension grew sharper. Every sound outside made them both turn toward the door. He checked the area around the cabin twice, scanning the trees, reading the ground. There were no signs yet, but he knew it was only a matter of time. When he returned inside, she was standing near the table, twisting her hands. "I'm scared," she admitted. He stopped in front of her, keeping a careful distance. "Fear makes people act without thinking." I'm trying not to," she said. "But it's hard." He met her eyes. There was strength there, buried under worry. And something else. Trust. That was the most dangerous thing of all. "You can stay until nightfall," he said slowly. "After that, we'll figure something out." "I'm sorry," she said, "for pulling you into this." He shook his head. "Just don't ask me to be someone I'm not." As the day wore on, the air between them changed. It wasn't just about danger anymore. It was about closeness forced by circumstance, about two people who had both been running in different ways. He felt the pull of it, the human need for connection, and it frightened him more than any search party ever could. He kept his distance, kept his voice neutral, kept reminding himself of boundaries. Still, when she spoke, he listened. When she worried, he noticed. And when their eyes met, he felt the weight of restraint press harder against his chest. By evening, distant voices echoed faintly through the woods. He stiffened. They're closer now. She looked toward the sound, fear flashing across her face. "What do? We wait. And we stay quiet." As the light faded and the woods grew darker, the man realized something he hadn't allowed himself to think before. Resisting trouble was one thing. Resisting what was growing inside him was something else entirely, and he wasn't sure how long he could keep both at bay. Night settled over the woods like a heavy blanket. The last light faded behind the trees, and shadows stretched long across the ground. Inside the cabin, the lamp burned low. The man moved slowly, careful not to make noise. Every small sound felt louder than it should. The voices outside came and went, carried by the wind. Sometimes they were close enough that words almost formed. Then they drifted away again. Horses snorted. A lantern flickered between trees, then disappeared. The search was real now. She sat on the edge of the chair, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her face looked pale in the weak light. "They won't stop," she whispered. "Not until they find me." "They'll stop when morning comes," he said quietly. "People get tired. Fear makes them careless." She looked at him. You speak like you've been hunted before." He didn't answer right away. He checked the window, then the door, and finally faced her. "I've learned what it sounds like when trouble walks nearby." A branch snapped outside. Both of them froze. He lifted a finger to his lips, then stepped toward the back of the cabin. He moved a loose board near the floor, revealing a small space beneath. It wasn't large, but it was hidden. "If they come inside," he said softly, "you go there. Don't move. Don't speak." Her eyes widened. "And you?" "I'll handle the talking." "I don't want you to lie for me." He met her gaze. "Sometimes telling the truth too soon causes more harm." She nodded, trusting him, though it clearly scared her. The footsteps came closer. A voice called his name from outside. He recognized immediately. One of the deputies. His chest tightened. He stepped forward and opened the door just enough to let the light spill in. "What do you want?" he asked, keeping his tone calm. "We're looking for the sheriff's daughter," the deputy said. "She ran off? You seen her?" "No," he replied simply. "I've been here all day." The deputy studied his face, then glanced past him into the cabin. The man did not move aside. Silence stretched between them. "Mind if we take a look?" the deputy asked. "There's nothing to see," he said. "Just me and my fire. If you hear anything, you let us know." "I will," he said. The deputy turned and walked away. The man closed the door slowly and leaned against it, releasing a breath he didn't know he was holding. His heart pounded in his ears. "She's not safe," he whispered to himself. He tapped the floor gently. She emerged from the hiding place, her face pale but determined. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yes, I did," he replied, "because now I know something." "What?" "Which means whatever you heard matters." She sat down, pressing her palms together. "I heard them talking about evidence, about letting someone go who shouldn't have been free. It wasn't my father, but someone close to him." He sat across from her? "And you think that person knows you heard?" "I'm sure of it," she said. "That's why I ran." The weight of her words settled over him. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a small secret. This was danger that reached farther than the cabin, farther than the woods. "You can't stay here much longer," he said. "I know," she replied, "but I don't know where else to go." He thought for a long moment. The life he built was simple because it was narrow. This choice would break that simplicity wide open. "There's an old trail," he said finally. "It leads past the ridge to a place no one uses anymore. We can reach it before dawn." "We?" she asked. "I'm not sending you alone," he said. "Not now." She looked at him with surprise, and something close to gratitude. "You don't owe me this. I owe myself the chance to do one thing right." They left the cabin under the cover of darkness. The woods felt alive, every sound sharp and close. He led the way, stepping carefully, choosing paths that left little trace. She followed, trusting his knowledge of the land. As they walked, the distance between them closed, not in touch, but in understanding. Both knew this moment would define what came next. When they reached the ridge, the wind picked up, carrying the faint sounds of the search far below. He stopped and looked back once, toward the cabin hidden among the trees. "That place kept me safe," he said quietly. "But it can't do that anymore. Neither can running forever." They moved on together into the dark, knowing that by morning everything would change, and that resisting fear was no longer enough. Now they had to face the truth. They reached the old place just before the sky began to lighten. It was nothing more than a forgotten building near the edge of the ridge, half hidden by tall grass and broken fencing. Long ago, people had used it as a rest stop, but time had taken most of it back. Still, it offered cover, and for now, that was enough. They went inside and sat in silence, listening to the wind pass through the cracks in the walls. The night had drained them both. Fear does that. It takes more energy than work ever does. The man leaned against the wall, eyes half closed, but his mind stayed alert. She sat nearby, knees drawn close, her face calm but tired. When the sun finally rose, it brought no comfort. Light meant visibility, and visibility meant risk. "We can't stay here long," he said. "I know," she replied. "Running won't solve this." He looked at her, surprised. "Then what will?" "The truth, but told the right way, to the right people." He thought about that. For years he had avoided truth because it came with noise, judgment, and pain. But hiding had not erased his past. It had only delayed it. "If we go back," he said slowly, "there will be consequences." "I'm ready for them," she said. "I have to be." They left the shelter once the morning fully broke and moved toward the edge of town, staying out of sight where they could. By midday, they reached a place where the woods thinned and roads began again. The sounds of people carried on the air, voices, wagons, life continuing as if nothing was wrong. He stopped walking. "This is as far as I go with you," he said. She turned to him, confusion flickering across her face. "Why?" "Because if I go any farther, I'll be pulled back into something I left behind," he said. "And because you need to face this without hiding." "You've already stepped back in." "Maybe," he admitted. "But this is your fight now." She nodded, understanding. Then she surprised him by reaching out and gripping his hand briefly. It wasn't dramatic or lingering, just real. "Thank you," she said, "for not turning me away." He squeezed her hand once and let go. "Do what's right," he said. "That's all any of us can do." The man waited, watching until she disappeared from view. Then he turned back toward the woods, unsure of where he belonged anymore. By evening, word spread quickly. People gathered. Voices rose. Questions followed answers, and answers raised more questions. The sheriff's daughter spoke calmly, clearly, leaving nothing out. Some people listened. Some didn't want to. But truth has a way of standing its ground. The sheriff himself looked older by nightfall. The weight of what had been hidden showed in his eyes. He didn't speak much, but when he did, it was enough. The person who had caused the danger was taken into custody. Not quietly, not easily, but it was done. As night fell again, the sheriff walked alone toward the edge of town, stopping near the woods. He knew where the cabin was. He had always known. "You can come out," he called. The man stepped into view slowly, hands open, posture calm. The sheriff studied him for a long moment. "You protected her," he said. "I did what anyone should," the man replied. The sheriff nodded once. "You could have run." "So could she," the man said. "She didn't." Silence stretched between them, not hostile, just heavy. "You're free to go," the sheriff said at last. "And, thank you." The man didn't answer, poured and walked back into the trees. Weeks passed. The cabin was quieter than ever, yet it felt different now, less like a hiding place, more like a choice. The man still lived alone, still worked the land, still avoided crowds, but something inside him had shifted. He no longer felt invisible by his own doing. One afternoon, a familiar figure appeared on the path. She walked toward the cabin with steady steps, not afraid this time. "I wanted to say goodbye properly," she said. He nodded. "You did what you needed to." "So did you," she replied. They stood in the sunlight, the woods calm around them. There was no promise, no dramatic ending, just understanding. As she left, the man watched until she was gone. Then he returned to his work, knowing one thing for sure. He had resisted fear. He had chosen integrity. And sometimes that was the strongest choice a person could make.